Good day. This is Stephen Clift. I'm doing a test run of a keynote speech I'm giving next week in London at the Consultation Institute's Power to the People conference. This is to be a roughly 40-minute speech with an additional 10 minutes of questions. And like many of my presentations, I have lots of material and I need to do a trial run to figure out what to slice and dice from it. So I will pause at times to take notes and the like, but for the most part, this is a real live run, and I'll probably make this available. If you're listening to it, I've made it available. So here we go. Well, thank you everyone for having me here today. This is my speech on engaging times, and I'm going to give you a perspective looking back. Actually, I was asked to talk about the future, but I'm going to talk also about what I've learned over the last 20 years. In hopefully about 20 minutes, and share 5 key lessons when it comes to digital engagement in the public life. I'm going to conclude with a sort of looking forward. I'm going to look at 5 challenges that I see. Hopefully we'll turn those challenges into opportunities. But first I want to start with a story, a very personal story about digital engagement, and what it leads me. Well, I messed that up. So we're talking about the engagement generation today, and how do we digitally engage out of necessity when it really matters. So that's the heart of this first story. So this is Joe. Joe was at my house a few months ago. We had a little fondue party, he and his wife. They're his 2 children. Joe went missing in July. We received a very sad Facebook message, right? My husband is missing. I don't know what to do. He's been gone a number of hours. And, you know, a lot of exciting things happen in Facebook. You share pictures of your children. You connect with long lost friends. You have a lot of fun. But it's also about real life. And, you know, Katie and Joe are a wonderful family, and they go to my children's school and church, and they, you know, are a heart of the community. So Joe's missing. One of the things about, you know, a missing person is that you don't, you know, unless there's like some evidence of a crime, the police honestly do not get that involved. It could be viewed as perhaps, you know, he ran off or something to that effect. And so as friends of Joe, we began organizing. And one of the key things that a swarm of friends organized, and family, of course, was a search for Joe. The police or the family did find his work van not too far from the Mississippi River, near one of their vendors for their small business. They owned a glass installation company. And so they went searching, and they found some evidence that he had been by the river, but, you know, not much. They found a boot. And, oh gosh, I gotta really practice this through. So I'm not going to share this with the world. So they found a boot. No, I can't say that. I really got to talk this part through. Joe went missing. They found his van. Let's see, van 2 nights. This is the part I've never actually given. But it was basically on the family's shoulders to figure out how the heck to pursue this further. And so starting with obviously emails and calls and phones, an event was organized to really search along the river in detail with as many friends and family as possible. This flyer was posted around town, but also it was posted around eDemocracy. eDemocracy has a number of neighborhood forums that we host. This is my nonprofit that I work with. And on social media, of course, on Facebook. And, you know, upwards of 100 people turned out to help comb the beach. But the key thing here is that digital engagement emerges out of necessity. Necessity is the mother of all invention. So one of the challenges of this time of year is that we had some of the highest amounts of rainfall in June and July. Actually, this is in June in our history, and the river was raging. And Joe was known to skip a rock or two, and apparently there are different parts of the river that were faster than others. And but the suspicion is that somehow, through foul play or something else that happened, we just don't know. He most likely was in the river. So the tools of engagement that emerged. So we mentioned Facebook as a way to let people know you need help. You had extensive amount of texting and among particularly the moms, if you will, moms surrounding Katie in the network. I helped set up a folder on Google Docs, right? So we set up a drive where we could share documents, spreadsheets, other information that we were collecting. They had a vigil, and they collected email addresses. They had a sign up for the search. They used Sign Up Genius for that, and sort of just using the cloud, if you will, to gather information. I'll talk about online maps in a moment. We use Weebly, which is a very easy to use system to create websites. Later in about a month later. And YouTube was used by members of the family to, share photos of Joe and memories. And we used PayPal. The last minute before a community fundraiser, we set PayPal up and received many, many donations for the family. And of course, email, both across groups and sending out updates to people. So I was involved in 2 digital requests because essentially the family was on their own to search for Joe without the lack of evidence of foul play. I did 2 things. One was I thought it'd be helpful to try to track down detailed maps of the shoreline. And I found at least 12 different maps, from federal maps and PDF files to Department of Natural Resources maps, but wasn't finding really what gave the level of detail and flexibility that I needed. So I posted a query to the 300 members of the Open Twin Cities online group. If you've heard of Code for America, the idea of a local brigade or club trying to use technology for good, trying to open up government with open data, that's what Open Twin Cities is. And eDemocracy is the host of that in our region. So I posted to 300 members and I said, hey, I'm looking for mapping tools. This is a very dynamic group. This is a photo there from one of their hackathon events. And it responded with a number of posts, tips, advice, and it pointed me to a tool, which I'll show on the next slide, that allowed me to create basically an atlas out of digital maps from OpenStreetMaps. And then I also sent an email to the federal agency that runs the lock and dams. So we have these major lock and dams along the rivers. And I asked a number of questions, but including might we distribute a poster about the search and information about them to staff that are on the river 24/7, essentially, eyes, if you will. What did I receive from that? Crickets. Okay, I'm gonna have to put that back. Swap those slides around. Let's just do it right now. Okay, so let's get back in here. Boom, boom, boom. All right, so so I received no response, and I was quite shocked by that. Here in a time of greatest need, no response. Now, the lesson about that is pick up the phone, right? If you think about it, as an active citizen, if you will, sometimes the telephone is just a far better tool, or just physically go to that location. Email is a torrent. And so the other email, so I'm going to switch flops. I'm going to pull these apart, pull apart. digital requests. And so one of the more exciting things that I thought in terms of like, you know, getting advice from the community was that because I found it challenging with all these difficult interfaces from government. We had Google Maps. Yes, they were pretty, but less adaptable. You couldn't, you weren't supposed to use it for purposes beyond what they allow. And then there was the OpenStreetMap. They crowdsourced government and other data. And there's a website called fieldpaper.org, which allowed me to offer a tool to the team on how to print river search areas. And there's actually another tool that another parent brought to the mix, allowed us to see real close in and help define search areas. And the search happened, and what it found was that they found a boot and some his phone on the shoreline, and really no evidence about why or how he would have gotten into the river. We just don't know, and it's a mystery. So with that confirmation, obviously it was clear to shift into how do we help this family. And a month later, month and a bit later, month and a half later, we organized a very large community fundraiser. It actually took place in the schoolyard exactly across the street from my home. I helped do the website for the event and set up the PayPal, like I mentioned. And lots of different people emerged to help. And I can tell you that, the way people engaged online as part of this, as well as in person, but the key was that backbone. And it's a fundamentally, powerful way to get things done. And I should note that it was at that event that our local city council member met Katie, the wife, for the first time, offered to help, particularly with the police, to help get the work van released so that she could get that back into her use. And, what I can say is that how I see this impacting the reality of digital engagement is that essentially we're living in this era of what Lee Rainey and Barry Wellman have called networked individualism. Katie was in the center of her Facebook network of her friends and family. People, everyone in this space, is basically experiencing social media and online as if they are in the center. And then you work out from there. You have your friends and family, you have your communities and your professional peers, and then you have the public and entities. And I think this is the foundation for understanding how to engage in this world. Laurel, it's okay if they make some noise. I'm not going to be sharing this, so it's just a time check. I changed my mind. I messed up enough times that I'm not going to. Oh, it's not my fault. I messed up. It's not your fault. Okay. So here we're talking about networked engagement. So the question from this story is, how as individuals can we digitally engage? As individuals digitally engage, how can institutions join in? Versus, how do we invite the public in on our terms? And most of the engagement thus far has been more, come to our special website to give us input based on the questions we ask. There's a fundamental disconnect. And so I'm going to talk about the 20 years that I've been stuck in the future and share some lessons. So back in 1994, I helped create Minnesota eDemocracy, which created the world's first election information website. I also worked in government, and I helped create the portal for the state of Minnesota, the first website, mn.gov today. And I was government by day and citizen by night. I shoveled information one way, and then I got to interact through eDemocracy extensively. And so in addition to election information, we created the online town hall, an online space where you could talk Minnesota issues and politics. And then in '98, we actually started creating the Minneapolis Issues Forum and St. Paul Issues Forum, where you could talk city issues, which really brought things forward. So we were this version of the digital town hall. This is the launch of our Be Neighbors effort, where we launched an effort to create inclusive online neighborhoods. But originally, you sort of think about the city level, where you have all the different institutions. You have government, schools, businesses, all around a town square. And so that's kind of our model, right? It's like we're intentionally trying to bring together all the people in the town square, and then the everyday citizen in that mix, whether it be at a city level or increasingly at the neighborhood level. Now, I've spoken across 30 countries, and everybody's so excited about these various, the Arab Spring or massive protests going back to Estrada in the Philippines a decade ago, and how technology was used to basically tell the story, command and control coordination, come to the square, leave the square, and the like. And it's a huge story. But I will tell you that my view of this is that this is not everyday democracy. This is not, it's only, the question is, how does it scale to local public life? And I think when you have such high expectations, it's a challenge to see sort of the granularity of what the Hyde Park is, or the community circle, or the planning meeting, or the community update, or the community rally. And then what about scaling even down to even more local life? We call it the greasy spoon, the pub, if you will. Your friends and family, that middle one to me reminds me of very much of the Facebook experience, or the little ladies on the bench, sort of the short little emails back and forth. And of course, this is the internet, so there's definitely some mud fest, or I guess this is a tomato fest out there as well. And so, on the other hand, we have had experiences where, in our community forums, this is the Powderhorn Park neighborhood, we have over 20, perhaps 30% of households connected every day, roughly, to this online community network, right? They can talk via email and web and share notes. And there was a terrible sexual assault of a mother in front of her children while she was skiing across this small urban park, and at gunpoint by juveniles. And lots of concern about the mother, what this means for the neighborhood, but also this being a very compassionate neighborhood, people also saying, well, what's going on with our youth? And so within 3 days of it hitting the news, there were about 400 people in a rally in 11 degrees Fahrenheit in Minneapolis saying, we want to take back our park. And so it is possible that, very local online engagement can bring the masses out. But this is the more rare story. And so I think we're going to be more nuanced as we dig in about our lessons when it comes to digital engagement and public life. So top 5 lessons. It's about people. Agenda setting is powerful. Institutions do matter. There's a loudest voices problem. And we are now going beyond passion. So I'm going to share these in some detail. We have a small break for a couple of questions. And then we're going to talk about some future challenges and opportunities. All right, so my view is this is about people. It's about people. A little flashback here. In the early days of e-democracy, I had a chance to speak, like I said, in a number of countries. And this is back in the 90s. I created these circles. What I found was that when I talked to governments or political parties or the journalism, they all looked at this from their perspective, right? And for the most part, they were taking existing information, putting it online, and sort of pushing it out there one way. And I think it's really important to think about the e-citizen center, the public participation square, if you will, that basically gathers all that information and interacts with it. So by having a Minnesota Politics and a Minneapolis Issues Forum, using real names and the like, I don't know, over a decade before Facebook emerged, we sort of gained a lot of experience about what it means. And today, popular brand social media, not just Facebook and Twitter, but primarily, that is the public participation square where all this stuff interacts and engages. So agenda setting is what I see as the most powerful aspect. A lot of people talk about decision making or deliberation, but I will tell you that from my experience, the two-way it democratizes. So in 1998, we elected Jesse the Body Ventura. This is before he was governor, to governor. And it was a real populist upswing. And, I sat down with his staff after the election because he was getting flooded by email because, he inspired a lot of people saying, I want to make a change. And they actually set up on their system when they did an auto reply saying, thank you for your note. We received it. They included a link to our Minnesota Politics forum. And part of the argument was, wouldn't you rather have people talking to each other rather than sending you email all the time? And I think that, having people be directed to where they can have conversations, very powerful. Also around that time, because of this dramatic statewide election, I posted on our Minneapolis forum about squirrels. And I'm going to take a moment on this story because I haven't told it in many years. If you've heard it before, you're an old timer with me. But I posted a post, and I said, "Are squirrels in such a high density ever considered a public health risk?" And added that little smiley face. And it launched one of the most dynamic conversations the Minneapolis Forum had ever had. And the question is why it related to people's lives. Everyone had a squirrel story. And long story short, there actually were more squirrels in the area. And the reason I found out is I got called by the Pioneer Press, by the New Journalism. We understand you're an expert on squirrels. We're doing a story. And as it turns out, they found out by talking to some scientists that there were more squirrels because they came in after a drought a few years ago, and they found the city full of food, and they settled in even more so with some mild winters as well. And then I got a call from the government. We're with animal control. We understand you're having trouble with squirrels. How may we help you? When does the government call you? So very early on, I had that personal experience again, that something I said online had an impact. Something I said online had an impact. And so the diagram here is essentially, it's the who's who of the community that you gather, including everyday citizens, but also the mayor and elected officials and people who work in civil service, and being intentional about defining a group. And that things come around there can end up in the local media, can be circulated at City Hall, can be shared on Facebook. And now increasingly, this square is happening, like with Facebook groups and other tools, all over the place. And the question is, who sort of defines the geographic space in our, small d democracy way? So a couple things. My view is that agenda setting is a precondition to impact decision making and deliberation. You need spaces where people can set the agenda online in your community. Let's talk about politics. All politics being local. Representatives represent local areas, and that's incredibly important to have those spaces. And so two-way real names, that was a key thing that we found. And as an institution, folks who view institutions, you think about where can you go to visit the parade? Where are the people versus creating destination experiences? I think, this is, a huge lesson, is that if you don't go to where the people are, you're going to have far less engagement. The other thing I'll say is that there's a continuous diffusion of power in these kinds of spaces. So you create a directory of where people are connecting now, in not too long from now, they're going to be somewhere else. So that's important. And I've also found is that the well-resourced in society adapt more rapidly. So you can create these public spaces where you can have this engagement, but certainly assume that those that are have power or are seeking power and are well-resourced will adapt far more quickly than the everyday citizen. It's what I've seen. So I was asked to talk about institutions in the description for this, and national institutions. So I had some comments, about that. And I think it's really important to think about how we build capacity to engage online. But I also will say that there is a lesson about being of the internet versus on the internet. And e-democracy, even though it came back in 1994, was really sort of an of the internet kind of project. It was an accident of history, a trusted neutral host of dialogue among people who disagree, right? By 1996, all the groups that gave us all their web content had their own websites. But it is really hard to, if you don't create sort of projects or efforts that are of the internet that really work from the basis of how people use the medium, I think you're gonna have far less impact. On the other hand, we also have had sort of a mistake in project accountability. And so in the 90s, even though a lot of folks thought they could become internet billionaires, and they would have they would scale fast and they would shoot for the moon, and a lot of nonprofit or government funded projects had very high expectations. They'd get halfway and they'd feel like a failure, and then they'd disappear. And for some reason, my mantra was set low expectations and declare victory. And momentum was more important than having an instant success. On the other hand, what we really need to do is have reasonable expectations. And now I think a lot of people are nervous to set any expectations. And I think that the lesson now is that the ones that are succeeding the most are setting expectations, and they're building out the infrastructure to measure results. And now whether that be folks that use the net for online advocacy or other types of tools. I think we need to bring that more into the general civic engagement space where we do better measurement of what we're doing. So our number one problem, things we haven't solved, if you will, that fundamentally undermines the ability to use the net in democracy to improve democracy, is how we deal with loudest voices. And whether they be the most partisan, or whether they be angry, or whether they be just troublemakers. And because the biggest challenge is that people with power, to be honest, basically use the loudest voices quagmire to dismiss all voices online, when it doesn't serve their interests, right? And that includes dismissing very diverse voices online, and sort of really just sort of clinging on to, the traditional participation, which honestly is often very time and place discriminatory, right? You had to be at a certain place at a certain time. And so the power of anywhere, anytime, we can't miss that. And so just to put this in greater perspective as a challenge, only 23%, according to the Pew Internet and American Life Project, 23% of people say they never talk politics online, 23%. And you can see it is, and then you go to the next level, that 50% of net users never talk politics online. That's over 2 times the number of people who don't talk politics. And you also see the more partisan folks talk every day, right? The middle is much less engaged than offline. So this is, we think about living in sort of a contested time. Part of it is that connection between the 24-hour news cycle with sort of active social media among the most partisan. No wonder we feel so divided. It's because we have this engine of division. And again, this could be under a challenge, but this is a lesson, right? And we have not dealt with this effectively. So one idea for me is, how do you create a culture of civility? How do you have citizen-led spaces that work for people? And so when we started doing work in neighborhoods, we found this really important thing out, that elected officials, local elected officials, could basically say, those are my voters. Those are my voters. Combined with real names, they're real voters. So I just have a link here. You can, the slides are online. You can see a very in-depth dialogue, some citizens on a citizen panel about the future of a regional park. Basically came onto the forum, said, hey, neighbors, we're on this panel. We're looking for input. Here's information about these upcoming meetings. What are your ideas for the future, the next 20 years of this park? And then we will take the input from this forum and bring it into the official process. So here you had in my neighborhood, actually, roughly 30% of the households connected, and they came to the parade, and very substantial. So if tweets are this long, we have nice meaty replies. And I believe very strongly in sort of how you have stronger facilitation without costly pre-moderation. And so I mentioned those loudest voices, real names in a safe democracy, that is, are very important for public two-way spaces, in my view. Just increasing quality tremendously, as well as rules and guidelines and processes for dealing with the loudest voices. The other thing we all do is kind of quirky. We limit people to 2 or 3 posts a day per person. And so we stopped people from going back and forth and driving everyone else nuts. And that's kind of like Twitter. It has a character limit. We had a volume limit. So now, beyond passion, we are moving beyond passion. So many of the innovations in this space have been fueled by, people basically working their dream. So by going beyond passion, we're trying to do investments. More people are invested to pay to care, to make the change, to engage. There are groups like My Society, Open Knowledge Foundation, ODI, Sunlight, Code for America, local coding groups, the Open Government Partnership. They're all creating greater capacity for engagement. There's lesson sharing happening online. So I have a video I'm going to play. That's a minute. And it's about the culture of government, Open Government Partnership. They say it better than I can about how we're building out the capacity in government to do this more smartly. We're understanding the interface between transparency, participation, and collaboration. So these are engaging times. We are the engagement generation. We're using these tools for our times. And what are they? They're digital. So now we have a chance for two questions roughly, just, and this is sort of do a little time check, mix it up a little bit before I go back into sort of the 5 final challenges going forward. So what I'm going to do is, okay. So all right, so we're going to cross that one out of there. Let's see here. Boom. Change it in real time here. Get rid of that slide. All right, so what I'm gonna do challenges. So what I decided to do, consider time. I created 5 challenging opportunities. I'm gonna focus on the first 3 and just, if we have time, I have some bonus slides at the end. Let me just say 2 quick things. So serendipity versus filters. There is a thing called the Facebook filter bubble where Facebook gives you ice cream. Twitter is kind of a torrent. And the challenge is that in democracy, we need a lot of serendipity. You need to be exposed to things you wouldn't click on. You need to hear voices that aren't from your friends, right? And so there's a real challenge that's emerging in that space in terms of, whether we actually are more democratized or whether we kind of actually get more and more isolated with people who are most like us. The other piece is making it visual, and that's more of a tactic. But clearly there's a lot of interest in websites that make planning other things more visual, visualizing the input coming in from the public. And like I said, I have a few. I'll hold those off. So the 3 that I want to focus on most are new voices, Facebook native politicians, and open data and civic apps. These are 3 sort of challenge/opportunities that are emerging for us today. Let's see, I want to just make the changes real quick here. Stop. Okay. Might be in my Google Plus now. Let's take a look here. Why did it stop? Hi.
Can you help me figure out how to do mailing labels?
On what? The printer? No, it's anything that's frustrating me more and maybe more angry is trying to do printing mailing labels on a computer.
Okay.
Never. My blood pressure is low right now. Okay, now what else can we do here to fix this up? My husband is missing. Oh, there it is. I could just do that one. It's a better picture anyway.
How did your practice go?
There's too much material.
Oh, yeah. We knew that.
Yeah. Way too much.
I thought it was going to be. It's not sticky, it's just so fine that it catches every single fiber.
I'm talking about dinner.
That's why you need to do stuff now.
Yeah, I know. That's why I've been doing stuff a while. Oops. Oh, am I still recording? All right, so.